Hello everyone. Since we have kind of completed the whole German DD line, I allowed my viewers to vote what line should I level next on the Russian server, and the winner of the vote was the IGN cruisers. Now, I won't really bother going over the tier 3 and tier 4 because honestly you spend such a short time playing those ships and you have protected matchmaking. It's basic cruiser gameplay. You stay on the move. If you don't stay on the move, that means you're hiding behind islands. You try to avoid giving too much broadside and you just shoot all day. That's basic both Tenryu and Kuma gameplay. The line gets interesting though when you reach the Furutaka, because, well, the Furutaka is pretty interesting because it has 203mm guns. This AP, I mentioned that this thing was an AP monster when I made my last commentary on this ship, which was actually in February 2016, so 2 years ago. And as you can see, not much has changed when it comes to the gun power. This thing still is an absolute monster. Well, it's been probably buffed a bit since then. This is of course the sea hull on the Furutaka, which is what gives it all this immense power. It already becomes fairly strong when you upgrade the guns. The stock Furutaka is actually monstrously awful, and you should be using your... honestly, you should be saving free XP on the Tenryu and the Kuma. You should be saving free XP just so when you reach the Furutaka that you can instantly upgrade the 200mm guns to 203mm. Because the 200 mils have 22-second reload, whereas the upgraded guns have 15-second. So obviously that's a night and day difference between DPM and effectiveness, and you want to get that upgrade as soon as possible. The Furutaka is a bit of a weird ship though, that when you end up against lower or same tiers, as I am in this game, you are a carry monster. You are an absolute monster of a ship. This AP is just so very strong, and the shells are so very heavy that you can consistently absolutely demolish any other cruisers with these massive AP Citadel volleys. It gives you an idea of basically what playing the Zao is later on in the game when it comes to AP. It's just very, very powerful, and same lower tier cruisers, even higher tier cruisers, need to be wary of this AP because it's so powerful. The problems, however, start coming in when you get up-tiered in the ship, and that's because the ship only has, is at 13.9 kilometers of range, and 13.9 kilometers of range when you're forced to face tier 6s or tier 7s becomes a problem. Becomes a huge problem, in fact. So the Furutaka is a bit of an odd ship in that sense that when you face the same or lower tiers, sorry about that, let me turn off my phone. When you face the same or lower tiers, your DPM, your power is massive. I would in fact almost call you overpowered in terms of effectiveness, because you can just punish and wreck pretty much anything. However, when you're up tiered, you feel like one of the weakest cruisers in the game. So to say the Furutaka is very matchmaking dependent is to put it lightly, because you go from being a monster against lower tiers to straight up struggling against higher tiers. Having a 13.9 km range against pretty much everything outrange you, like even the DDs pretty much have the same range as you. So especially on higher tier maps, when you get those large, very open maps, make life very, very difficult for the Furutaka. Ideally though, your armor is still great. The ship has some of the best, I think the best T5 cruiser armor, by far. As long as you remain angled, you will have, well, honestly, not many issues bouncing AP. In fact, like, I can show you this Kaiser down here, I can show you just the power of the AP. A mistake many people make, of course, with the Furutaka, and, well, not just the Furutaka, with many cruisers, is that when they try to angle against AP, they go perfectly nose in. And going perfectly nose in is, of course, just asking them to shoot your nose. And the nose on pretty much all cruisers, consistently across the tiers, get overmatched by AP. So the last thing you want to do is give them that perfect nose. Now, you see the angle I'm holding right now? Well, this is too much angle because I'm kind of baiting him to shoot me. I'm waiting until he shoots and then I'm gonna turn in. Because this is a very common bait. You give enough broadside to be able to shoot all your guns, and you wait until he shoots, and when he shoots you turn in, and there he goes. He's shooting, we turn in, and you notice, did you see how little damage I took? That was multiple hits from him. I took pretty much 0 damage. That's because I angled against the AP. I made sure that that thick armor on the broadsides was what ate those shells, was what bounced those shells. I didn't go nose in, I didn't go full broadside, you go in between. So you get that the thickest part of your armor angled against the enemy shells. That's when you are by far the strongest, and that's basically the angle you want to aim for. I think I'm going to drop some torps here. The torps are of course very strong. The problem is, I think, the 10-kilometer range already at this point if you upgrade them. The problem is of course that the firing arcs are very questionable, so in general, if you're going to use them in close range, you need to do it between his shots. You need to wait until he shoots, then you turn and torp, so that by the time his guns are reloaded and he can shoot again, you are angled. Trying to make sure I get it on the broadside. The shells that hit the broadside, I bounced all of them. The shells that actually hit the nose part of my ship, huge damage, 7k damage taken from those. So you can of course see the difference, just how important baiting those shells on your broadside is. Now, the closer you get, especially in that case, the harder it is of course to make the enemy shoot your broadside. He has a much easier time aiming for your nose the closer you are. And the more experienced the battleship captain is, the better he knows where he should be actively aiming at. You do have access to hydro and fighter plane, so honestly, Furutaka is a strong ship. It was a strong ship back then, it is still a very strong ship. The gunpowder, the torpedoes, it's just the armor, the health pool. I mean, 31k health at tier 5 is very, very good. But the issues, mostly the number one issue this ship has is range. That's really its drawback. And if you can work around the range, if you can make it, use island cover to get closer, or you just happen to get a map that's more suitable for shorter range, then you should be able to do quite well. Because the thing with island cover is it allows you to disengage when need be. If there's no island cover and you're shooting at an enemy and you start taking a lot of damage, it's very hard to disengage in the Furutaka. Yes, it's decently fast for a cruiser. I mean, you're not going to break any records, but it's decently fast for a cruiser. But the problem is, in order to shoot the enemy, you have already sailed to 13.9 kilometers from him. Probably around 13, to be honest. And that means that you are close enough for pretty much the entire team to shoot you. So, in general, when you're up tiered in the ship, you probably want to play fairly safe. A common mistake Furutaka captains do is that they are too impatient. They try to make their mark on the battlefield from the get-go. That's something a lot of cruisers do, to be fair. It's not Furutaka-centric, but the problem with the Furutaka is that the lack of range means that people who do it tend to suffer even more. Cruisers are a ship type that gain strength the longer the battle goes on. The less ships are around, the longer a battle goes on, the stronger the cruiser becomes. At the very start of the game, a cruiser is probably the weakest ship in the entire game. And that's no, well, if you have radar it might change, but an IGN cruiser at the start of the game, you're probably one of the weakest ships out there, and least impactful. The longer the game goes on, the more important, the more valuable you become. I'll try to go for a double strike here, set the fire on this guy, I already have fires on him, and then I killed the Izagaza. However, the Karlsruhe killed that guy just before he could explode. I of course popped my hydro to dodge the torpedoes, and sadly I get no double strike or Kraken at the end, which was kinda my goal towards the end of this short commentary. Still though, this game kinda showed you just what kind of monster, what kind of bully this ship is against same or lower tier. This is, well, this was 116k damage, 4 kills, sadly no Kraken because someone took that bogue at the end, but 11 citadels, it's just... the damage is disgusting. In fact, looking at team score, almost 2k base XP, and it was a very short game. And I pretty much fought every form of ship here. I fought cruisers, I fought battleships, I shot DDs, I bounced the battleship AP, I wrecked the carrier, and so forth. Like, low tier, same or low tier, this thing is just monstrously strong. The downside starts popping up when once you actually get up tiered. Detailed report. It was a less than a 9-minute game. That's how quick of a steamroll this game was. And the damage is still, of course, well, as you can see, not surprisingly, AP damage alone did 59k damage. So the Furutaka is a good example of the playstyle you can accept from the IGN cruisers. If you hate the Furutaka, you probably won't enjoy the rest of the line either, because Mayoko, Mogami, Ibuki, even the Zao, they all follow very similar patterns with... you excel at mid-range. You excel when you can use your AP somewhat effectively. And you don't really... Well, the Furutaka doesn't really have that long-range HE spam that you kind of start moving towards with the Mayoko, Mogami, Ibuki, and then the extreme version of the Zao. But if you're only looking to HE spam, then the IGN cruiser line is maybe not the most optimal for that, considering the French cruiser line exists right now, and the French cruiser line is less about stealth and using that mid-range AP and more about that long-range HE spam. So it does give you an idea of what to expect from the line, and it's one of the few lines that actually give you such a good example of how the line is going to play in the future. For example, the Soviet line gives no indication of how the Moskva plays until you actually reach the Moskva. The American cruiser line gives no indication of what the Des Moines plays like until you pretty much reach the Baltimore, because even the New Orleans plays differently because of different shell velocities. So you get a pretty good idea of what to expect when you play the early IGN cruisers, as well the Furutaka, Ioba, and so forth. It gives you an indication. You gain power, but the playstyle remains fairly similar. You just gain range and power and so forth. So I do like the IGN cruiser line, and I will be leveling it. I'll feature the Aoba and the Mayoko next, and I'm grinding towards the Mogami right now. So once I unlock that, I will of course move on and cover the rest of the ships, since it's been a while since I covered all of them. Anyway, let me show you guys my recommended build. As usual, I will start with the modules. Now, the absolute first thing you want to get on the Furutaka is the gun upgrade. Honestly, you should probably be saving 3 XP for this upgrade alone, because the difference between the stock guns and these upgraded guns is just night and day. Not only do the caliber become bigger and the guns in general get better values, especially the AP has significantly better pen, but the big difference is the reload. You go from a pretty honestly staggering 22-second reload to 15 seconds. That is such a huge upgrade that I don't think there's anything in the game that even comes close to being such a massive damage increase as this one upgrade. So on the Furutaka, get the guns first. Follow it up, probably get the B-hull just for the health and the maneuverability, or alternatively you can get the range. Both are good upgrades because the stock Furutaka is honestly pretty garbage. It's very start for range and it has horrible DPM, so you start by getting the DPM and then you either go for the range or for the hull upgrade. And ideally, of course, you want to get to the C-hull as soon as possible, because the C-hull is what converts your 6 single guns into 3 two-gun turrets, and that's what allows you to play it much more aggressively. And when you push in, it allows you to use the front 2 turrets and so forth. It's a massive upgrade, and it makes it more of an Aoba tier 5 than anything else. Ultimately though, the absolute first upgrade needs to be the gun upgrade, because this is 7-second reload is massive. Like, there are cruisers there that have less than 7 seconds reload, and this upgrade gives you that much, so it does put it into perspective just how incredibly strong it is. Consumable wise, priority is of course premium damage control. I don't have the Furutaka anymore, so I can't show it on this one. And I think you ran Hydra plus fighter plane on it, so pretty default stuff. I can't remember if you actually had fighter plane, I think you did, but ultimately those nothing is as important as the premium damage control. Upgrade wise, main armaments mod 1, you can already start going for the steering gears mod, because steering gears mod will become very valuable once you get to the tier 6, tier 7, tier 8, tier 9, because all of those have a propensity of losing rudder. In fact, it's kind of an IGN thing. When you kite away with these ships, you shoot backwards and then HE lands back here and it breaks your rudder. This happens very often, so you might as well invest in the steering gears mod 1 already. Air range you can't get yet, and steering gears mod 2 you can't get yet at tier 5, so those are future upgrades. Captain perks wise, priority target, the bread and butter of pretty much every single cruiser. You probably want to go for adrenaline rush, demolition expert, and concealment expert before you actually go for expert marksman. But expert marksman is very valuable, especially once you get to the higher tiers like the Mayoko here that has a shocking 45-second turret traverse. So expert marksman is very much a part of the IGN cruiser kit later on. Ideally though, of course, as long as you can avoid getting it, you should get adrenaline rush for that DPM increase. But expert marksman is a fantastic addition as well. Fire chance, of course, because Superintendent isn't useful until you hit tier 9 and you get that additional heal. So until then you get very little value out of it, so which means you can delay getting Superintendent fairly long. Concealment Expert is the bread and butter of every cruiser out there, especially the IGN line that has exceptionally good stealth, so you want to get that as soon as possible. Once you have that 12-point captain with these base perks, that's when you can start going with the other things. Like I have expert loader because I like being able to switch between HE and AP, since both are very, very strong on this line. Preventive maintenance for that turret survival, and of course rudder survival a bit. But this perk isn't nearly as important. Ultimately though, ideally you want to start building towards Superintendent once you get to tier 9. You want to have a captain that has access to it by then. And possibly you want to get AFT as well, because, well, Mayoko AA, for example, already starts being pretty strong. Ibuki AA is pretty decent, and Zao AA is, of course, very strong. So starting to spec in this direction is also starting to become pretty valuable and pretty tempting. But that's pretty far in the future. For the Furutaka, just that basic 10-point captain going for that concealment expert is probably more than enough for the average player. I doubt you even have a 10-point captain at tier 5. You might, but if you have leveled the same captain from pretty much the get-go. But ultimately, it's unlikely you will have many more points than that. Flag-wise, standard cruiser flags, which means faster reload on consumables, better fire chance on the guns. Later on, of course, you like to go the heal flag, but since we don't have a heal yet, that's pretty much all you need to bother with. You can go for the AA flag, well, not on the Furutaka, honestly, because you don't have any AA, but that's later on when you get access to defensive AA. Other than that, just go economic flags. Speed up the grind, speed it up. Try to get to the next tier as quickly as possible, since even though tier 5 is a quite fun and strong ship, it still has to suffer being up-tiered quite a bit, which makes it a bit of a struggle. Anyway, that was my Furutaka commentary. I hope you guys enjoyed it.